Hello, everyone. My name is Adefunke Alabi from University of Lagos. It's a delight for me to join this satellite conference on inclusiveness through openness. This is actually a collaborative research with Yetunde Zaid and Olubukola Olatise. And I'll be speaking this day on bridging the gap in open knowledge movement, plight of the excluded in higher education in Nigeria. This research is actually emanating from 4 universities here in Nigeria, and it will be really delightful for me to share with you our experience in these 4 universities. Okay, by way of introduction, providing the background on Open Knowledge Initiative, we all know that the Open Access Initiative is a means of improving teaching and learning in higher education. And historically, it started in the year 2002 by UNESCO. And ever since then, series of activities have been going on. And the Openness Initiative coincides with the SDG Goal 4, which is aimed at inclusive, equal, and equitable access to lifelong education for everybody by the year 2030, regardless of whether they have a disability or not. Now, who are the excluded in our higher education sector? We have those who are on wheelchair, we have the visually impaired, we have those who have cognitive disability and hearing problem. So speaking specifically now as regards those who are visually impaired students in higher education, we notice a rise in their population because these days, this group of students are also seeking for higher education all over the world, and their number is increasing every day. But they are faced with diverse kind of predicaments, in assessing learning, in assessing resources, even in meeting their information needs. Literature is extensive on this. We have seen the various exclusions they suffer based on the physical environment, inability to go into the library, inability to read print resources and all that. And that is not even the only scenario. We even see these days that with the open educational resources, they have series of challenges, and this constitutes exclusion in terms of the physical and environmental constraint, because we all know that this group of students, they cannot access these open educational resources because most institution websites are not compatible with assistive technologies. Yet, IFLA's position is clear. IFLA's position on inclusiveness remains that libraries should continue to provide support for inclusiveness of open knowledge as a public good to this excluded group of people. And so, why OER accessibility for the excluded? Why should it be a priority at this time? Number one reason is that it promotes lifelong learning. It improves learning outcome among this group of students. It gives them free access to quality materials. And not only that, they also have access to excellent educators, because they are able to use learning resources from across the globe, irrespective of their location. It promotes inclusive education. It gives them digital equity and social justice, and even it helps them to have what is called self-directed learning. They are able to learn at their pace. And Moon and Park in 2021 also highlights the relevance of OER accessibility for the excluded by saying that OER should focus on openness of learning resources for this group of people. And so we'll be looking at the term accessibility. What is accessibility when it comes to the excluded? When we're talking about accessibility for the excluded, focus should be on the environment, because the environment, according to IMS Global Learning Consortium, says that the environment should be able to accommodate individual learners' needs, regardless of their physical body constraints. So whether they are able to read print with their physical eyes, or they are able to hear, or have, or whether they have learning disability, accessibility should accommodate their learning needs, regardless of their disability or ability. And so when it comes to students living with visual impairment, accessibility denotes usability of that product, usability of service or facility, regardless of whether they are blind or they are visually impaired. Now, we need to look at accessibility specification. And this is a conversation, ongoing conversation about accessibility specification. And so if you look at accessibility specification for this group of students, 6 things has to be taken into consideration. Number 1 is legal requirements and international standards. And that's the outer part of this ring that you are looking at. It has to do with legal requirements and international standards. And there are 2 international standards that every open educational resource must conform with: the UDL, Universal Design of Learning, and WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guideline. The second one, the second circle in the ring, the second layer in the ring, talks about assistive technology and accessibility settings. And by that, it means that assistive technologies must be compatible with screen readers. These open educational resources must be designed in such a way that they are compatible with screen readers. Then the third layer in the ring talks about platform and third-party software. By that, it means that websites should be designed to conform with standard for ease of navigation. Then we move to the fourth layer, which is interoperability and personal needs and preference of this excluded group of students, which talks about the openness ecosystem for ebooks and other learning materials. Then the fifth layer talks about inclusive design, and that has to do with accessibility and usability of the content for everybody. And the final ring, which is that content creation, is talking about use of accessibility enhanced authoring tools by OER creators. So OER designers like lecturers and what have you, they must conform with content creation that use authoring tools that are OER compatible. And so still talking about the legal requirements and international standard, I mentioned that one of the legal requirements and international standard that must be followed as regarding OER accessibility is the Universal Design for Learning. And by that, there are 3 principles to it. Number 1 is that the open educational resource platform should provide multiple means of representation, should also have multiple means of action and expression, and finally, it should have multiple means of engagement, as said by Elias in the year 2010, and this has not changed. So what does it mean for OER content creators like our academics, librarians? What does it mean for us? By multiple means of engagement, it means that there should be provision of multiple resources to meet various needs of learners. That should incorporate audio and support for tests. By multiple means of representation, there should be flexibility in presenting open educational resources. For instance, the ebooks, there should be audio format for it for the blind. There should be caption for graphics. There should be transcription so that those who have hearing impairment can have access to this kind of open educational resources. And there should also be large print for those who have low vision. So in other words, there must be multiple means of representation, and we must ensure that our faculty and OER content creators, they conform with this guideline. The last principle of the universal design for learning states that there must be multiple means of action and expression. And by that, what does that mean? There should be alternatives to pen and paper when students are supposed to, interact or engage in quiz. For instance, maybe it's a learning management system and all that, where their lecturers have put content of the open educational resources. There should be multiple means of action and expression. They should be able to use keyboard, facilities to use keyboard in place of mouse, and also it should be compatible with assistive technologies. The second legal requirement and international standard that must be followed when it comes to OER accessibility is the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, which was developed by World Wide Web Consortium W3C. This is talking about content accessibility as well as web browser accessibility for those who have vision impairment or hearing or speech or cognitive disability. And what this web content guideline is saying is that you are not just looking at content accessibility for this group of people, you're also ensuring that they have access to the web, because these open educational resources are oftentimes accessed through the web. So consideration should be given to 4 principles when it comes to the WCGA. Number 1 is that it should be perceivable, it should be operable, it should be understandable, and must be robust enough. When we talk about being perceivable, that is, there must be provision of test alternatives, there should be caption and other alternatives to meet the specific needs of students who have peculiarities. When it comes to being operable, users must be able to operate the interface themselves without having any functional challenges. For instance, people who are vision impaired, they should be able to use keyboard instead of following instructions that has to do with the use of mouse. It should also be understandable, that is, text must be readable and understandable. The OER resources should be readable and they should be understandable. The content should be suitable for this group of students. And finally, it should be robust enough. And literature reveals that this is the most challenging principles that is yet to be followed when it comes to accessibility of OER, because these open educational resources have to be developed and created in such a way that they are compatible with assistive technologies, so that students who have vision impairments or any form of disability should be able to access the content of the open educational resources. Now, our research focus. This research, like I said, emanated from the experience that we have with our visually impaired students at the University of Lagos. We have a dedicated space for them in our library where their learning needs are being met. But usually what we do there is, their learning resources, learning materials, course materials that are not accessible to them in form of print are being converted to readable formats for them. And then we also give them access through our website to open educational resources, which we have categorized according to their faculty and all that. But we still discover that they have challenges in one way or the other in being able to access the open educational resources. And so this research was set out to understand the exclusion they are facing in terms of accessibility to open educational resources. And our research was guided by these 3 objectives. The research was set out to find out the accessibility issues faced by visually impaired students in higher institutions in Nigeria. Number 2, we also tried to ascertain the prevailing inclusive institutional policy or culture that are available in Nigerian higher institutions. And finally, we sought to determine the strategies libraries could use to ensure OER accessibility for students living with vision disability. So the research approach we followed was interpretive approach to enable us understand the phenomenon associated with this study. We invited visually impaired students from 4 public universities. These universities were University of Lagos, University of Nigeria, known as UNN, University of Ilorin, and University of Jos. The total population of students in these 4 universities is 237. And we also had 4 heads of libraries forming parts of the study population. The sampling technique was purposive sampling technique, which we used to recruit 40 participants for the study. The study used the semi-structured interview as data collection method, and data collected was analyzed thematically. Approval was obtained from the different designated authorities to conduct this research. And so what did we find out? The biographic information of the students revealed that a majority of the participants were male, and they are within the age group of 25 to 30. A majority of our participants for this study are in their 200 level, and they are distributed across various faculties. We have some in education, some in social science, some in arts, and some in faculty of law, but a majority of the students are from faculty of education. Now, on awareness of open educational resources, this study ascertained that awareness of open educational resources is still growing among students who have visual disability in Nigeria higher education institutions. Some of the participants mentioned that OER is a fantastic idea. It's a fantastic idea, and it gives them opportunity to access educational materials without barriers. And another participant said that he has used the OER at several times to supplement traditional educational materials received from lecture rooms. Now, on the accessibility issues, the challenges faced by visually impaired students, this study revealed that a majority of the students, they have challenges, like I said, in accessing open educational resources. Some of them said they did not find it user-friendly. Some said they have difficulty in navigating the web. Findings also revealed lack of compatibility with screen readers and assistive technologies, and other assistive technologies. And then there's also lack of auditory interpretations or description for graphics in such a way that they could gain a mental picture of what the graphics or image in open educational resources are talking about. Our findings corroborate what is also revealed in literature concerning the plight of the excluded in higher education. Previous scholars like Sand and his colleagues, like Moon and Park, they found out the same reason accounting for exclusion of people living with disability, especially those with visual disability in higher institutions. They reported that due to poor assistive technology, incompatibility of poor assistive technology with OER, an inability to read learning materials with graphical images or video clips, students with visual impairments are still facing exclusion from using open educational resources. Another scholar, Nguben and his colleagues, they found out that there is lack of digital skills on the use of assistive technologies, and there's the assumption that students living with visual disability, they know how to use these assistive technologies. Another reason accounting for this exclusion from accessibility to OER revealed that there is inappropriate font sizes that are being used in, for content creation for some of these open educational resources. They are inappropriate, and there's low awareness and lack of training on use of OER by this group of students. So we also try to see what are the prevailing inclusive institutional culture that we have in Nigerian higher education, particularly at universities. And our findings revealed from the student perspective that the only inclusive culture that is prevailing, which they enjoy, is a sense of belonging that is given to them by their various institutions in terms of designated space in lecture rooms for them, so that they have access to ease of recording their lectures. And then libraries also creating dedicated spaces for them so that they can have access to learning resources, access to learning resources in an uninterruptible manner. From the head of libraries, we found out that there is a system of inclusive policy, and that one of such policy helps them to subscribe to the Creative Commons, which give them the impetus to create OER materials, and these are then made available on their library websites. For instance, at the University of Lagos, University of Jos, we see them, even University of Nigeria, they have made attempts to curate some of these open educational resources, and they make them available on their library website so that students can have access to them. Now, in terms of dimensions to achieving inclusive institutional culture in higher education, there are processes and channels to inclusiveness. And one of the major process or channel that any institution should begin to think of in this era is to have inclusive policy. It's not just enough to have this policy. This policy must be written and it must be adapted and given visibility, just like every university gives visibility to their mission statements and their vision statements. Now, in terms of policy, there's lack of inclusive policy. Where there's lack of inclusive policy, pardon me, there'll be inappropriate procedure and non-compliance with OER standard, because when this policy is lacking, nobody will know, the lecturers particularly, and OER content creators, they will not know the procedure to follow. They will not comply with these standards. And so implementation of an inclusive policy can only be driven by inclusive culture. As regarding way forward on OER accessibility, this is what our study revealed. Librarians underscore the need for advocacy. All the head of libraries that participated in this study, they underscore the need for advocacy on creation of a dedicated digital library for visually impaired students with compatible assistive technologies. It's not just to create the space for them. Their computer devices, mobile devices, and every avenue to give them compatible assistive technologies must be followed. On the part of the students, they are of the opinion that university libraries should have dedicated websites or online repositories for OERs for them. By this, university librarians should go the extra mile before subscribing to open educational resources to look at the nature of such resources and be sure if they have accessibility compliance. Moreover, are they also available in diverse formats, so that formats that are suitable for this group of students are already taken care of? before even subscription to these databases from where, some of these e-books, e-journals can be accessed. The students also are of the opinion that screen reader should be accessible and they should have text-to-speech features. They also are of the opinion that there should be training on use of open educational resources for the visually impaired students to increase their competence in accessing these learning resources. And finally, they are of the opinion that more advocacy should be made on conformity with OER development guidelines to promote inclusion for people living with disability. And there are two guidelines that are recommended, the UDL and the WCAG guidelines. So they are saying that librarians should ensure that they engage more in advocacy on these accessibility guidelines so that people can be more aware. The awareness can be more, they should promote awareness in terms of openness for people living with visual disability. So what is the takeaway for us in this study? What we are trying to say, the takeaway for us, the key takeaway is that, yes, we have been involved prior now in providing the infrastructure for OER. We have made efforts. Various initiatives has also been laid down to ensure that petitions, on openness has been signed at various levels, regional, national, international. We have also engaged in training and fostering development and reuse of OER by faculty. Now, what is the way forward? What should we do more in the spirit of inclusiveness through openness? The key takeaway for us in this section is that we should be more proactive. We should be more proactive in promoting accessibility of OER for people living with disability. We need to be more proactive. Emphasis and focus should now be on accessibility of open educational resources for people living with disability, such that they have what is called social equity with their sighted counterparts. And so what is the recommendation from this study on inclusiveness through openness? We have 3 recommendations to make. Number 1 is on policy development on inclusive culture. Policy development on inclusive culture. This cannot be overstressed. There is need for every institution to have a policy that promotes inclusiveness. And there are 3 angles to this. When you have inclusive policy, it will lead to inclusive culture, it will help to promote inclusive practice, and it will also help to promote inclusive policy. Number 2 is that there should be advocacy on adoption of OER accessible guidelines. There are 2 guidelines that must be followed, the UDL and the WCGA. Librarians should take out more time to educate people on the need to follow this framework. When this framework is adopted and followed, students living with disability will be able to benefit maximally in the openness era. And finally, there should be ICT support, training and provision of assistive technologies for students living with visual disability. There should also be support provided by librarians in helping them to locate these open educational resources. You can please access this literature to read more and gain more insights into the conversation on openness of OER for students living with disability. You can reach out to us via our institutional email. Yetunde Zaid can be contacted via yzaid@unilag.edu.ng. Buki Olatise, you can contact her via our email or olatise@unilag.edu. And myself, you can contact me through alabi@unilag.edu.ng. Yetunde Zaid is currently the University Librarian at the University of Lagos. Olubukola Olatise is in Automation Unit at the University of Lagos, and I am also in Serial Section at the University of Lagos Library. Thank you very much for your time.